Great. Okay, so look, we'll kick off. If anyone comes in late, I'll just keep an eye on the thing there and let them in. So, yeah, I think the first thing to say is I'm really pleased with where we are in both the Wednesday workshop and the Friday studio from the work I've seen so far. Now, obviously, there's some work that I haven't seen yet, but for where we're at for the week that we're in, it's pretty good. It's actually very good. I'm also pleasantly, I suppose, well, not surprised, but pleasantly pleased that it works online, that the reading of scenes and the performing of scenes online seems to be going okay, you know, and we're still getting a lot out of that. I really like the way, you know, Aoife and Owen set up their Farragut North in the Friday studio on Friday. Like, it was literally like Aoife was in a hotel room in a dressing gown. It was very real. It was fab. It really took us to the given circumstances, you know. So yeah, the more you can do that, you know, the better. But of course, you know, you have the limitations of where you are and everything. I understand that too. But overall, yeah, really happy with that. Really happy with where they're going. And again, I don't know when we're going to be back in the studio. I'm just crossing my fingers that it won't be too long. It's supposed to be a 3-week lockdown. But look, I'm actually looking around for other places that we can use that are open or that we can use. But I suppose this is the kind of problem I'm having with the Applied Art of Acting students as well, where if I was to, I mean, I have a couple of options that I could look into, and I am looking into them, just to get us back in the studio faster, so we don't have to do too much online. But you know, the students themselves are saying, well, you know, Dublin's riddled with COVID-19. Like, I don't necessarily want to go into Dublin, you know. And so there's that side of it as well. Like, are we actually, in all of our haste to find a place where we can go and be all in the same room, are we actually just putting ourselves at risk? I mean, the lockdown obviously is there for a reason. So part of me is going, yeah, get back into a studio as quickly as possible. And part of me is going, don't, you know, just hold off, you know, let this thing settle down, let the number of cases, whatever it is that they do, come down. Then we can get in and we can put the camera on for the entire rest of the term. But of course, the other thing about that is, if that doesn't happen, I mean, we'll have to get back in somewhere. You know, if they decide to extend the lockdown, then I'll have to seriously get another place, because I mean, you know, I want you to have the experience of the camera and the camera technique and all that as well. And we can't really do that online, you know. That's really the only thing we can't do online. Everything else pretty much we can do. Yeah.
No, we're in around Arklow, no?
Well, do you all want to come to Arklow, do you? That's a heck of a long trip. I could probably find somewhere down here, actually. Yeah, I didn't sort of think of that. I thought that, you know, the idea of dragging everybody out of Dublin down to here probably wouldn't go down too well. But you could if you want.
There's also Gorey. No, plenty of good space in Gorey.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Look, let's just play it by ear and see how we go. Well, I'm looking at a couple of places. I'm looking for at a place tomorrow night. I'm going to go and visit it in Dublin that might be useful, might be usable. But again, it'll depend on. Again, it depends on whether we want to actually risk getting on public transport and stuff like that and doing all that. Someone have something hissing in the background there, or a siren or something? No, it doesn't matter. If you aren't talking, just go on mute. It's probably just better then, because, you know, it's, yeah, that's it. It's probably just easier for everybody. But if you want to speak, of course, speak, which is what I'm going to ask now. So the next question, of course, is how are you doing? And are you happy with where your scenes and monologues are? And do you have any questions for me at this point?
No, fine. We're just working on the scene, so we're happy out.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, that was my washing machine, so I'll put you on mute again.
Right. You got to wash the clothes. I understand. It's just so weird, this whole thing, isn't it? You got people's dogs barking and stuff going on, and one of the interesting things about the Applied Art of Acting during the week, we looked at self-taping, you know, in detail, which you do in the full-time courses at the time. And I was able to show them exactly where in my house I do my self-tapes, the 2 different areas I use for 2 different kinds of self-tapes. And I could actually, like, I would have been able to do that in the lab. You know, I could actually literally just go, here you go, here, bringing the computer around, this is what I do, and here it is, and all the rest. That was interesting. But yeah. Okay, great. So look, if there's no questions or whatever, I'll just keep on talking and you can interrupt me, all right? Whenever you do have a question of some sort.
Yeah, sorry, David. I was a little late in there this morning. I was working, so my apologies.
That's okay, man. You're all right. You're fine. Okay, so what I was going to talk
David,
about... Yes.
I might actually send one of my monologues over to you because I just can't find myself in it. Like when I keep doing it, it's just not coming to me at all. So
Yeah, okay.
you might have some advice for it, or I might not do it. I don't know.
Oh, well, I'm sure I will have some advice for it, considering you're paying me for that advice. I'll have plenty of advice for it. Just, I mean, without me seeing it yet. Is it the same one you did in a couple of weeks ago? No.
No.
Which one is it?
It's a brand new one. It's off an old episode of Criminal Minds from years ago. And I just can't find my pace in it or anything.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great. I'll definitely have a look at that for you. Just send it on in whatever way you like, and I'll check it.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Interesting, though, that you know, my next question was going to be, this is for everybody, of course, if that's happening, is to ask yourself why, you know, and, you know, Siobhan's already able to say that to herself, at least, it's something to do with pace. You know that it's a pace issue of some kind, and then it's a matter of working out, okay, what dictates pace? Why is that pace going wrong, or doesn't feel satisfactory to you? Is it a question of tempo rhythm? Is it a question of extended imagery, that the imagery isn't quite there, that you need to do more work on
developing that imagery so that it comes from you to the audience or the other character, or both at the right pace. So yeah, pace will always come down to one of the components of the technique that you need to just focus on a little bit more fully. So have a think about that. You know, you may not be able to answer that just now, but have a think about it. And once I've had a look, you might be able to sort of say to me what you think it is in more accurate terms. Yeah. It's kind of like, I guess it's about adjusting each component of the technique as you go along. It's like just making little tweaks and things. And sometimes it's a matter of just realizing what you haven't done. You know, that when you're delivering a monologue, you know, you're talking about, I don't know, like just biofuels or something that you know nothing about. And then you have to go back and go, okay, well, I don't know what I'm actually talking about here. Right. Like I've got this piece of this American TV series that I'm in this week. I'm going to be, my Siri just came on for no reason. This American TV series that I'm going to be in. And again, like I can't give anything away for confidentiality, but this is a guy who is an expert on a facet of military stuff, right? And I was looking at it this morning, just sitting in the bed at like 7:30 this morning, drinking a cup of tea, going, I don't know anything about this stuff. And it's as simple as that. I just don't understand it. I don't know what it is. So then I spent a good hour, you know, training myself, you know, finding out exactly what this thing is and what this explosive is and what this thing does and where this particular chemical was made and what's the chemical that, you know, what are the compounds in this thing and all that kind of stuff. Because I need to be able to feel that when those things come out of my mouth, that they are something that I fully 100% understand. And if I don't, then I'm just, you know, I mean, pardon the very sort of parochial way of saying it, but I'm kind of bullshitting myself. And in a lot of ways, I'm bullshitting the audience, and I'm bullshitting the production. I'm bullshitting the director, and I'm bullshitting the other actor in the scene. When all I have to do in the modern day that we live in is look it up, you know. So that's got nothing to do necessarily with what your problem is, Siobhan. I mean, it could be something completely different, but you know, you might be sort of looking at it thinking, well, do I understand this stuff? And maybe I can just look into this in a simple enough way by using the Google machine and finding out, you know, a little bit more about what I'm actually talking about. And maybe that will, because you sort of said there as well, that
that you're sort of finding it hard to find yourself in it. It could be more a case of being able to find your truth, to find truth in it by totally and fully understanding what you're actually saying. But again, I don't know what it is, so I'm only guessing here, Yeah. So yeah, that's it. I mean, it's the same as like when I was on Vikings, Frank Mazzell, when I got casted, and said, "Can you ride a horse?" And of course I said yes, because I was broke, right? But I can ride a horse, but I hadn't. I can ride. I've ridden horses a lot, but I hadn't ridden a horse for over 15 years. In fact, if I'm honest with myself, more like 20, right? So I went and got, my kids were actually getting horse riding lessons at the time. So I went to their teacher and I said, "Can you help me out?" And she said, "Yeah." So I got on the back of a horse and paid for a couple of lessons, went up a couple of mountains, and and it's the same thing as I was talking about with the kind of the military example. The same thing applies to something like that. I mean, if my character basically lives on the back of a horse, if that is the mode of transport of that time, I don't want to look like or even feel like I don't belong on the back of a horse. It's just going to throw me, and it's going to throw my audience, and it's going to be a pain for the production as well, because they're going to be shooting the thing going, "This guy's supposed to live on this horse practically. Why can't this guy look comfortable on a horse?"
Why is he looking for the seatbelt?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's adapting yourself to the environment, really.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's the work. Like every job has work. It's not as if just because you're an actor. I mean, I know a lot of us get into acting because we want a job that we'll love, but at the end of the day, it's still a job. Every job requires preparation and research, and whether you're a teacher or a doctor or a whatever, it's anything. There's preparation involved.
Mm-hmm.
And you can choose how well you prepare, or how unwell you prepare as well. But you can certainly notice a difference.
Like I think historical roles, it allows you to research the kind of things which they did not have back then, which we have now.
Yeah.
And that probably puts a lot more restraint on yourself, because for example, up on the horse, as Luke said, there's no seat belt, so you kind of need to fasten yourself to the harness or to the saddle a lot more, and therefore your character doing that over and over again, there's probably like a sense of disorientation and sluggishness in your character, because it's very tiring, to keep yourself upright on a horse like that. It's these little things, that make, your physical state more believable. And obviously with the makeup, they make it look dirty anyway. So, but even as a performer, it's always good to research, like how bad your health could be as well.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it depends on the situation, of course. It depends on the character and what the character's going through. But yeah, I think the main general premise there is that if you don't understand it yourself, then you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have a hard time convincing anybody else that you are who you are. And I mean, and you don't have. I mean, yeah, it depends. I mean, you can go down the whole Daniel Day-Lewis, deep spiral of going and spending time in a jail cell or whatever that is, and I think that's great. And I know I would too if I was playing a role like that, But you don't have to do that either. But as long as your imagination is powerful enough, and it links up, of course, if your imagination links up to the research, it becomes one thing, so that you feel an ownership of it. Anyways, any other questions or points of order there? That good question. Yeah, so Siobhan, fire that one onto me and I'll have a look for you as soon as I get a second, right? All right, so look, we'll have a bit of a chat today about the industry and archetype. And if we have time, we'll get into multiple objectives as well, because that's what I want to start looking at as we go along now into next week's work, all right? And that's for the Wednesday workshop guys in particular, but the Friday studio guys, you may have done this quite a bit with me, but you may not have as well. So again, it depends on how much you've done with me in the past. But let's just start with archetype in the industry. So we talked about this a little bit already, the Wednesday and the Friday guys, but I just want to go into a little bit more depth with it, because now I'm kind of hoping that once you've done this work with me and you continue to train and become better and better, that you'll put yourself out into the business and try and start to get some work for yourself. Some of you already do that quite a lot, right? Others of you are just at the beginning of that process, and it doesn't matter either way for the purpose of this. But first of all, the casting director will look for your type. Okay, so sometimes we call that typecasting, right? But it's an archetypal thing, yeah. So it's the archetype of what you are. So, you know, Lulu is, you know, a young woman. Barry is a man of 30-ish, right? I would imagine, right? I'm a man in his 40s. Etc. Okay, so it's usually based on your age and gender, right, and then ethnicity as well. Okay, unfortunately, ethnicity, but it is getting less and less. Okay, so for example, you know, someone like Rhea might be asked to play, you know, a female cop in a cop TV drama in Ireland these days, just as readily as, you know, Siobhan might. You know, it really makes no difference in terms of ethnicity anymore. It used to, and I'm not talking, I mean, I'm talking about, you know, reasonably recently, you know, be like, oh, well, how, we can't, you know, the audience will just go, why did they cast an Asian person in that role? I don't understand. Now I can't concentrate on the show. But that doesn't happen. That's not the case anymore, right? But archetypally, yeah, you'll be sent for particular things that fit your archetype for the most part. Mm-hmm. So you just need to think about what you're putting out there into the business, right? And this comes down to your headshot, of course, and then your showreel material as well. Yeah. So if you're particularly interested in playing, you know, again, you can control this. You know, you can start to think about what you want to do rather than what the industry in some way wants you to do. You can say to yourself, well, okay, I'm interested in playing, you know, classical roles or roles in epic dramas and things of that nature. And so you might therefore, you know, grow a beard and grow your hair, and or, you know, Aoife would keep her hair the way it is rather than cutting it boy short and straightening it, you know, which would be some effort, but you know, it would make a completely different look for her, whereas that hair at the moment might get her particular roles in particular kind of epic or Irish stuff, you know. So just have a think about that for yourself. You know, there's not something you necessarily need to answer, but you know, I want to say this the right way, of course, but casting directors will kind of look at you and go, I don't know if that person will suit this. So they might look at Joseph and say, yeah, I need someone that doesn't look quite as vintage or whatever, or period, you know. I'm looking for someone who looks much more like Sam, for example, who's more sort of a modern, more clean cut kind of looking lad, right? There's an old kind of joke in the movie Withnell and I, if you've ever seen it, you know, these Cheroux vendors, you know, they can't see beyond a haircut, you know, they think a haircut is beyond the reaches of my ability, but it's actually in a way kind of true. Like sometimes they can't actually see beyond a haircut, you know, but again, others can as well. So that's archetype, right? So that's just the idea of you knowing exactly kind of who you are and what you're putting out there to the business. And then you'll more than likely get called for stuff that's based around that archetypal look that you have. Yeah. And so get your headshots done with that in mind. That's what I always suggest, you know. Again, you know, a sophisticated, and once you've, okay, sorry, I'm sort of skipping ahead here, but once you've done things a little bit more, let's say you've done a few things, right? Then what happens is the industry tends to start to think of you in different ways then, okay? So then, like, for example, I can have long hair and get cast as a World War II soldier, who would never have had long hair, and they'll just cut it, right? Which is going to happen this week at some point. I'm going to lose all this stuff that you're seeing here. That's going to all be gone. It almost went on Friday when I went for the wardrobe call. Actually, they just decided not to do it on the day.
Have you shed a private tear?
No. No. It's basically just lockdown hair anyway. I just stopped cutting it, and then ran out of time to go and get it cut. So I've always done it, though.
You've not seen lockdown hair.
Oh yeah. I'm sure yours was like that long before lockdown, Joseph, was it?
In a lot of ways, it was. It's the fringe that gets in the way, though.
Yeah.
You look good at an AC/DC concert, all right?
Yeah, don't hurt your neck there, man.
Well, there you go, David. That's a new archetype for me. I could be the kind of guy who goes to AC/DC concerts.
Yeah, well, you could be in a thrash band or something. Yeah, absolutely. You could be in a heavy metal band. There you go. If the heavy metal movie's coming out, good for you. You've got it. Yeah, so like that. Yeah, once you start getting a little bit more of a foothold, in the business, and people start kind of going, okay, well, we know this guy can act and we know he can cut his hair, then everything will be fine. But put out there, you've got to start somewhere. Is my point. In the business, you need to kind of you need to get a hook in there and get a role or two of some sort where you can prove yourself, and you can start to build your CV and your biog. Yeah. That's the archetypal idea.
David, how often should you update your headshot? And there's different trends with headshots, because when I got mine done about 6 years ago, it was all black and white. Everyone had to have black and white. When I'm looking at them now, they're more color and they're more expressive and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So traditionally they were black and white, but that's just a tradition because there was no color photography when people first started getting these things done. But that's purely a tradition. It's got nothing really to do with anything. So I mean, all headshots these days really are color. But how often you should get them updated? Really, when you feel like you don't look like them anymore. That's really what it is. And you have to kind of be honest with yourself as well, and say, well, I don't look 22 anymore. I just better get my headshots fixed up. But sorry.
And are physical CVs, actual CVs, still a thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if a show reel had kind of replaced it.
Oh no, you still have your physical CV. Yeah. So it's a single page of what you've done. Yeah. Where you've trained, what you've done, special skills, and the work. The work you've done. Yeah, so you should have that as well. But everything's done online these days. It would be very rare for you to find that someone in the business would want you to actually send a hard copy rather of that to them. It's more than likely it'll be all done online.
They by any chance wouldn't ask for a cover letter as well, no?
Okay, well let's get into that. Okay, so I'll just go back to Siobhan's question about the headshots. Yeah, I would say when you're older, probably every maybe 4 years or so, something like that. That's generally how often I do mine. I think if I think about it.
Sorry, David, just to intercept there. I'm 43. I have found I have aged so much in the last. Well, I think we might all have, but for the last 6 months in particular. So I look at my phone. I'm booked in to get headshots next week because I just thought, no, that youthfulness or whatever is gone because COVID had sapped it out of me, and I'm being honest about it. But I don't want to rock up to an audition or to a casting self-tape and they're looking at me going, no, that's not right. So I think it depends on how you age, how cruel or how kind aging is to you, and that is about honesty, isn't it? So
it is, yeah.
Anyway, that's my tuppence worth there.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. And look, there are certain periods of your life where people do age, pardon me, more than other times in your life, obviously as well. So when you go from sort of, I don't think I really changed much at all from sort of 25 to 32 or 33. I pretty much looked the same, but then things started to change, and between sort of 40 and 46 now, I think I've changed quite a lot. But yeah, everybody's different in that way. Yeah, I think that the first thing I said that was the main thing, that when you look at them and you say to yourself, okay, look, I really don't look like that person anymore. That's when it's time to change them. Yeah, and get them updated. So yeah, so again, a lot of you will already know this, so I don't want to go into it in too much kind of just technical depth. But yeah, you need a CV, you need your headshot, and these days, of course, showreel material, which hopefully, if we can film some stuff in this course, you should have some stuff that you can at least give out to people or send out. But yeah, most of that's done then online. And so just answering Joseph's question, then you just send an email with all of those things attached. Okay. And the email, you just write a cover letter, and the cover letter that you send to casting agents who you're looking for representation from, make sure that you know who you're sending it to. So if you're sending it to an agent, you're asking for representation. If you're sending it to a casting director, you're asking to be kept in mind for future roles that they might be casting. Okay.
I normally write what would be in a cover letter document in the body text of the email anyway, and that in itself is the cover letter.
That is the cover letter. Yeah, you don't need an extra cover letter that's like an attachment. Yeah, and that's basically how it works. I mean, sometimes you will come across. Interestingly, you sometimes do come across old school casting directors who will actually have a physical copy of your headshot and CV. Even if you haven't sent it to them, they'll get them printed themselves. Like I went to an audition for Hubbard's there a little bit, well, no, I'm talking maybe 2 years ago now. And John Hubbard had my CV in one hand and my headshot and a 10x8 headshot of me in his other hand. I was like, wow, that's unheard of. Usually there'd be a laptop open in front of them,
I've read online, I've done a lot of homework on this, but a few years back, what I'd done was I got my headshot printed out and I had my CV, and I went to the document file of my CV and I repositioned the content to a certain format. Well, not format, but what happened was I would print out the page and I don't know what it is, but apparently the size of the CV document itself must correspond to the size of the headshot. And apparently what they wanted was they had the headshot to be stapled or attached in some way to the back of the CV to those exact specifications. So like an 8x10 CV to an 8x10 headshot. Yeah. And obviously I wanted to make sure that the information in the CV was formatted correctly so that when you look at the 8x10 document, it's all right in the center. Like it's not too much to the left or too much to the right kind of thing when it came to formatting it online before you print it out. Because in that way, casting directors just have a quicker way to look at your CV and your headshot at the same time.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's still a thing or not.
It's not really. I do recall that being a sort of a period of time where they wanted the headshot on the back of the CV. These days, most people actually have their headshot as a kind of thumbnail on their CV.
I have that as well.
Yeah.
But they just wanted the big thing on the back as well, so there's a bigger image to look at rather than have to squint on the small thumbnail size image.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's okay. And if someone asks specifically for that, then yeah, do that absolutely. But usually no. I mean, they'll ask. They'll always ask if they want something in particular. Yeah. So yeah, the CV, the bio, or what we call a biog in Australia, or CV, right? And then your showreel material. I was just going to say again, not to sort of go over old stuff for the applied art of acting guys and everything, but with your showreel material, it doesn't matter if you don't have a polished showreel at first. Okay. I know if Louise was sitting right beside me here, Louise Kiley would say the same thing. She would just say, look, just make sure that there's something that I can show to a director. If a director says, can you show me something of this person acting? Okay. So even if it's just a scene, a 4-minute scene, one scene that you've done in class, that's really good, that we've filmed on my film camera, sounds good, lights good, then you literally can just set up a YouTube link to that, as long as they've got something to look at. That's the main thing. And then over time you can develop your show reel and put your titles and everything on it as well. Okay. And yeah, use YouTube or Vimeo and password protect it on Vimeo, or use the option on YouTube where only people who you send the link to can see it. Don't let these things be out there for the public, because you just never know where they'll end up, and you might want to get rid of them, one day. To keep them private to yourself. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I didn't want to sort of you spend an awful lot of time talking about that stuff. I'm more interested in how you kind of think about yourself in the business and where you see yourself in it. But I don't want to paper over that either. So is everyone reasonably clear on what's required, those three things? Does anyone have any questions on that?
I was just wondering, I know they say like every 6 months you should, if you don't get like representation when you first look for it, email them again like after 6 months. Is it the same for casting directors, or should you just kind of assume that once they have your material, they have you?
You know, you should always send it I would send it every six, maybe 8 months. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely do it again. Especially if you haven't heard from them at all, because yeah, you mean you're just not fresh in their mind, you know. You just disappear from their consciousness, and you don't want that to happen, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, no, do send it again. And it's not because they're ignoring you; it's just because they're so damn busy. There's only so much they can keep in their consciousness, obviously. But if you're there kind of every 6 months, they go, oh yeah, there's that guy Andy. He did the applied art of acting. You know, we'll have to get him in for something at some point. You know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My two sons there had an audition, had auditions for Louise Kylie on Thursday. Yeah, Thursday afternoon. Yeah. It was a recall for a TV series that's being made. Yeah, she was you know, interested in seeing them because they're kind of, you know, they're constantly in a headspace because they keep sending in good screen tests, you know. They, you know, they haven't got anything, but they keep asking for them. Ali Coffey, there's Katie from Ali Coffey contacted me this morning and said, look, we're casting this TV commercial, can your sons send in a tape, please? You know, just and we were going to, but we ran out of time. We literally didn't have time, and the expiry it expired. You know, we missed the deadline because we were just so busy. We just missed the deadline, and they specifically contacted me to ask if they'll do it, and that's because they're fresh in their mind. They're just at that point where they're young, they're good, they fit the archetype really, really well of teenage boys, 15 and 14, and they can act. You know, and they're interesting to watch. So, you know, that's where you want the casting director to be. You know, you want the casting director to be in that place where they've got all their options laid out and they're going, Andy Malone didn't send in a tape for this. And then they're sending you a private text saying, Andy, did you get the brief for this? And if not, here it is. Can you please send us in something, you know? And that's what you should be aiming to, where you should be aiming to be at, you know?
Right, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you've got to kind of be active in that way, and you know, don't feel afraid of sending it every 6 to 8 months either. You know, you're not hassling them. You know, you're helping them. You're helping them you're giving them an option. You know, you may not be the option they're looking for this year or next year. There just might not be anything that they're after, but if you keep on persisting, eventually you may well be, and that's where you want to be. You know. Cool.
Thanks.
No worries. Any other questions on that? Okay, cool. So yeah, I just want to focus quickly then back onto the archetypal idea before we move on to the multiple objectives and stuff, right? But yeah, I always try to put across to my actors in all of my courses, whether it's the full-time or the part-time, that you have a unique contribution to make to the business. Okay. And I don't mean that as a platitude or some kind of life coaching thing. It's actually kind of a literal thing. It's true. Like Barry there has something that he will offer or can offer and contribute to the business. And Andy has something that will be completely different that he will offer and contribute to the business, even though they're both men probably around about the same age, right? They've got, it's yourself that you bring to it. I know you're playing characters and you know how I think about that the character is a unique human being and all the rest, but the artist in the business is unique as well, I think, and really important. And that's really what the business is looking for. You know, they're looking for the next Philip Seymour Hoffman. They're looking for the next Meryl Streep, but not because they're looking for another Philip Seymour Hoffman or another Meryl Streep. They're looking for the next actor who's going to be intelligent and creative and artistic and contribute something really important to the world of the dramatic arts and the film arts or the theater arts, depending on, or both, in the case of both of those, you know. So you need to kind of think about that. And you've taken the first big good step, which is training, you know, so that you can, so that, you know, if you imagine yourself sitting down in an interview with, you know, Charlie Rose, or someone who's actually going to interrogate you, what you do and the artistry that you bring to the world, then you have an intelligent dialogue that you can have with them. I'm not talking about an interview with Graham Norton where you tell a funny story about how, you know, a dog bit you or something when you were young. That's not it, right? I'm talking about, you know, inside the actor's studio kind of thing, where you're saying to them, you know, yeah, this is what I want to try and do. This is what I want to try and contribute and achieve. Now, Tom Hardy kind of talks about that in one of his interviews. He says, I don't want to misquote him now, but he's talking about how he had a really tough early time, you know, his drug addiction and stuff, and really had a bad time of it. And then he kind of turned himself around and he said, well, look, what am I going to do? You know, and I've got this thing where I think I can act. So then, you know, I think the way he puts it is that I went and found some teachers and they helped me to decide what I can bring to the business. So you're not just another actor waiting for the phone to ring, you know, or waiting for the email to come through. You know, you're not thinking that way. You're thinking about how you might be able to be that person that, you know, the Charlie Roses of this world or whatever want to talk to, because you have a way of looking at acting that's intelligent and artistic, you know. And then there's the kind of work you want to do, you know, and that's okay too. You can choose that kind of work. You don't have to do everything. You know, you don't have to do, you know, all the TV commercials or whatever you want to do. I mean, obviously we have to eat, so we have to, you know, I don't turn down anything, you know, obviously, especially at the moment. But, you know, you can ask yourself, okay, what kind of work do I want to do? Do I want to do these big epic pieces of historical drama like Vikings or fantasy stuff like Game of Thrones, and that's the world I want to get into? Who are the casting directors who are doing those things, and hit those guys, you know, really make sure they know who you are. Send in that headshot of you with the hair and the beard and whatever else that you think will be useful to get that, or the, you know, that particular look or whatever, and pursue that, you know, go down that road. Yeah.
Yeah, you tend to see a lot of the same actors actually pop up in these type of dramas like Game of Thrones. They've been in movies then of that kind of era as well, you know, and Harry Potter, kind of the cast from Harry Potter, a lot of them ended up in Game of Thrones as well. So it's like that, the kind of archetype where they've been cast as that before, to just get into the projects like that much easier, it seems.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the other reason, of course, that actors get recast is because casting directors and directors know that this is the kind of stuff that they can bring. That they'll bring something really interesting every time. They'll bring performances that are grounded, that have gravity, that are you know, that are interesting, that will draw the audience along the journey of the scene, you know. And that stuff's, you know, that stuff's what directors and casting directors are looking for all the time.
Yeah.
And I guess that then comes down to how you approach auditions and screen tests and self-tapes and everything as well. I mean, if you do come across as that person who really doesn't know what they're doing, but really, really wants a part, it's very hard to cast somebody like that, you know? If somebody comes in and they're just normal and friendly and down to earth, and then they just literally hand their contribution over. Here's my idea for this. Here's what I've decided this will be according to my technique, or can be according to my technique. That makes them go, okay, we've got someone here we've got someone here who knows what they're doing, has their way of doing it, and has something really interesting to contribute. And then they start thinking about that and talking about that. You know? Like even last week, you know, and I went for this costume fitting. You know, it's just a costume fitting for this thing on Friday, and they were looking at the thing the uniform that I was dressed in. They were looking at the the different medals and things. And I just happen to know some of those medals because my granddad, who's 100 years old, has some of them. And it's like, wow, like these are these things. I was actually able to tell them, this one probably shouldn't be here. I don't know if this guy would have this, but he'd have this one, and he'd probably have this thing here. You know, they're going, right, okay, great. We'll have to look all this up. So started getting the phones out and checking it out. You know.
Yeah, but you're already bringing something to the
Exactly.
project, then, you know, it probably ups your status slightly, you know, for consideration for a roller. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, but I mean, this is how we learn, and this is acting to me is the most wonderful way of learning stuff. It's a history lesson every single time you do it. You know, you're living a life that isn't yours, literally. You know, and you're living in the 1940s, or you're living in, you know, the 1680s or something, and it's just, you get a feel for that. You get a bizarre, imaginative feel for that. You know? Yeah. Okay, cool. So any other questions on that stuff? And I just want, again, I know I'm not answering any questions here. What I'm doing is just putting it out to you. Maybe it's, in a way, it's a kind of an appeal in a way, because these are the kind of actors that I want to be working with myself when I go onto sets. These are the kind of actors that I want to have in my studio, which, you know, I'm looking around here and I do, which is lovely. You know, generally these are the actors who come and train with me as well, because the ones who aren't interested in this stuff, they'll go somewhere else. You know, they'll go and do a screen acting course somewhere because, you know, that'll show them how to, you know, basically say the lines believably and all that, and not spike the camera. But, you know, when we look at the kind of the deeper nuances of acting and character creation, you know, my hope for my actors is that, you know, when, you know, in 5 or 6 or whatever, however many years time, when they come back to me and say, oh, this is what I'm doing, or I turn on the TV and see them in some fantastic role, that I've helped to create an actor who's contributing something really important to what we do, not just kind of, you know, sort of getting by and making a few bob, you know. I'm not explaining that very, very well, but
No, I'm with you. I get you 100%.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so any other questions on that, or any points anyone wants to make? Okay, cool. So let's talk about multiple objectives, just with the last sort of bit of time that we have. Some of you have done this with me before, and the work is always kind of evolving. So these things often get, you know, more, or sometimes clearer or more nuanced as time goes by, all right? So you know, the Wednesday workshop guys in particular have been looking at objectives, okay? What does my character want, all right? And that drives the scene, yeah? Stanislavski said this, Meisner says this, Strasberg says this, you know, Stella Adler says this, Uta Hagen says this. You know, the objective initially and originally was all about helping the actor to concentrate on something other than the crisis of being an actor. Okay, so, you know, if I can put it that way, yeah, instead of getting tied up in, how do I do this? You know, Stanislavski said, well, just concentrate on making a cup of tea and then everything else will go away, right? You know, or concentrate on getting the girl to go out on a date with you and forget everything else, or concentrate on getting that guy out of the room and then he'll be fine, kind of thing. So there's obviously a focus of concentration, or a concentration of attention that the objective gives, okay? Now, some practitioners like Uta Hagen and others use the idea of an obstacle being in the way of the objective, okay? So the dramatic crisis is such that if if the character can easily get their objective, there's no drama. Okay, so it has to be something that is very difficult for them to get, and it also has to be something that they really, really have to have, like to the extent of it being life or death. You know, so if it is a matter of, you know, the guy wants the girl to go out on a date, it can't be a case of, well, there's plenty more fish in the sea if she says no. You know, this is the one that I want. I'm pinning my life's happiness on this person, right? So the stakes are high. You've heard me say that a lot, that, you know, you raise the stakes up so that it's really important. Yeah. Now, sometimes that's explicitly shown in the scene, especially if it's a scene of high violence or drama or whatever. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's very subtle, you know. So that underneath, you know, the character might really, really want to, I don't know, be romantic with the other character, for example, but talks about something else entirely. But you can feel it because you are that character and you have that push and that pull going on inside you, you know. I'm just using the romantic idea as an example. It could be the cooperative idea or the conflictive idea from Dogs in Space. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, but then you'll have another scene where clearly that character says, I want you to fucking get out of the fucking house, you know, and it's very obvious what they want and they're very much, you know, powering into it and all that. You know, Lulu's actually got a really obvious example there with Gerline. You know, Gerline really wants this guy sitting next to her, but and all of that is going on inside of her, but she never says it. And well, she does, but she makes a joke out of it. Yeah, you know. And then of course, Martin McDonagh being fabulously clever. There's a lovely moment in the scene where she grabs him by the hair and threatens to punch him. You know, which is exactly what little girls do to little boys in the playground when they feel uncomfortable. You know, they grab them by the hair and threaten to punch them, and that's a sure sign that they like them. You know? And they feel weird about it. So yeah, so that's obviously that's actually a perfect kind of example. And again, Martin McDonagh's very kind of, well, for someone like me, Martin McDonagh's work is very obvious in that way. It's very obviously structured. With archetype and antithesis and the way objectives are being used, and I don't mean obvious as in simplistic either. You know, it's wonderful stuff, right? Okay, so I'm already getting towards what I wanted to say. Okay, so you'll probably be noticing now that in the scripts that you're working on, right, your character isn't usually that simple that they just want one thing at any one time. Okay, so if I can just go back to the obstacle idea for a minute, if you have an objective and an obstacle, there's always going to be a sense of aggression and violence in that. Okay, so that the obstacle is something I can't have. If the objective is something I can't have because of an obstacle, what ends up happening is that I become frustrated. The character that I mean becomes frustrated that obstacle is in the way, and their desire becomes to destroy the obstacle, to obliterate it in some way, to get past it. Yeah. So as you can see, even by that language, there's a lot of kind of aggression and violence in that. Not necessarily in the physical sense, but maybe even just sort of in the sort of psychological sense. Yeah. And it tends to give us very sort of intense and often extreme sort of emotional reactions in the scene, yeah, which sometimes can be great, yeah, but often, as we've talked about as well, often they are too simple and not interesting to watch. So watching somebody get terribly upset, you know, and scream and yell and throw a chair might feel satisfying to the actor, but to the audience, they're kind of like, you know, they're not really with you on that, you know. You ever have sort of feel that feeling of, you know, that actor is up there emoting wonderfully or whatever, but we're not with them, you know. So multiple objectives does the opposite. Okay, multiple objectives is where you talk about your objectives as things that draw the character forward always. Okay, so the character wants this particular thing, but also wants this particular thing at the same time. Okay. And then the lovely thing about that is that that can become really beautifully complex. Yeah. So, and I think that again, if I can just use Gerline in Lonesome West, that is a perfect example of that as well. You know, that she very much wants this guy sitting next to her, but she also wants him to be okay. And she's not going to mess him up by actually confessing her feelings to him, because it's only going to make things worse for him, right? So you have this really lovely kind of feeling of her wanting him and not wanting him at the same time, wanting to be with him and wanting to keep her distance from him at the same time. Yeah. And then underneath that, she wants to smack him at the same time. She wants to just slap him out of it, slap him out of his mood. He's there filling himself full of Guinness, and that's not something that she wants to see either, because when you care about someone and you see them self-destructing, it's pretty horrible. So she's got a number of different objectives that she wants at the same time. And the result of that, of course, is what we refer to in our technique as an internal contradiction, where the character is being pulled in two different directions at the same time. And that is really deeply human. And that's what's more interesting for the audience to watch. And it gives us a sense of suspense as well, so the character wants a number of different things at the same time. We see that is happening in the audience. We relate to it because we've all been there in one way or another. And we want to see what's going to happen next, And that comes down to that. Let me use a really simple example, right? I think I've talked about this with a number of you before, but if you have a bar of chocolate there and, you're on a diet, you've got to kind of keep a bit of an eye on your weight or whatever it is that you're doing, and you're being pulled in two different directions at the same time. Okay? So you could say that, the fact that you're on a diet is an obstacle for having the bar of chocolate. The other way to look at it is that I want the bar of chocolate and I want to be slim, at the same time, and I'm being pulled in two different directions. Yeah.
So the bar of chocolate is the obstacle then as well, in the other way.
Well, in a way it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But but if you think about it as being torn, that's a better, a simple way to put it. You're being torn in two different directions. It's where we see that tear. That's where the audience sees that moment and says to themselves, "Oh, I know that feeling. I've been there." And then they're going, "Will she eat the bar of chocolate or will she not?" And so that's where we get the suspense from. And then we start to care as well, which is, of course, when we get to lonely protagonist and all that sort of stuff, we actually find ourselves caring about that character. We care, we're saying to ourselves, "Oh no, don't have it. You'll be okay without it. You'll survive. Be strong." Or we're saying to them, "Oh, go on, have it. You deserve it," or whatever, depending on whatever place we're in as well, I suppose. Yeah. So the other example that I often use for this, which was an experiment that we did on camera years ago, me and a couple of other teachers back in Australia, which is where we got actresses to enter, all right, and they're walking along as if they're going home from a nightclub at 3:00 in the morning. And it's well lit, there's cars, there's other people. So it's a well lit street. They're walking distance, so they feel totally safe. But it's about to rain. Okay. And they can smell in the air that it's going to rain, and they come to a dark alleyway and they say to themselves, "Okay, if I go down that dark alleyway, I'll be home in 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe, and I'll be dry. If I stay on this main road, I'll be home in 10 minutes and I'll be soaking wet. But the dark alleyway has no lights and is unsafe at that hour of the night with, who knows who's gone down there after rolling out of a nightclub or whatever." And she's torn in two different directions. Okay. So do I want to be home and safe, or home and dry or home and safe, and I'm conflicted. And then of course the audience looks at this, a close up on the camera, kind of here, right, where the actress is walking along and she sees it and she sort of goes, and we're there with her going, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Which way are you going to go?" And then she'll choose one, and then we'll feel in the audience that sense of relief if she doesn't go down there, or that sense of anxiety when she does, hoping that she comes out the other end of the alleyway in one piece and all the rest, right? But yeah, you can think of any real example of when you are conflicted in life, of when you want more than one thing in life. And that's exactly what dual objectives or multiple objective work is all about. To actually identify those in your scene or your monologue, and then to take your time and allow yourself the feeling of, oh yeah, that painful thing of being pulled in two different directions. Yeah. So there's another one that we did with a guy in a bar who's sitting at a table doing a crossword, right? And a really beautiful woman walks into the bar, and he sees her at the bar, and he's doing his crossword, and he's married, and she's just absolutely beautiful. She's on her own, and there's something that's just really he's really drawn to her, and he'll be pulled in two different directions, and he'll make a choice, And of course, the audience, you're probably already sitting there going, "So what did he do? Did he go talk to her, or did he stay there and do his crossword?" Which of course is what we want to know. And then the audience becomes judgmental, and they start going, "What a bastard! He went and talked to the beautiful woman, his poor wife," or he stays at the table and they're going, "Good man yourself." Or they're saying, "You fool, go and talk to her,"
Or he just slips the wedding ring off his finger. You bastard.
But then we've got drama, don't we? And then that's
absolutely.
That's your typical soap opera situation, isn't it? Where the audience is going, "Ooh, what's going to happen next?" But yeah, so I mean, you could look at it another way, right? You could say, on the simple level, right? You could say, okay, well, the objective is to talk to the beautiful woman. The obstacle is his wife. Now for me, that really just depends on his entire opinion of his wife, So, and we don't necessarily know that, right? But his wife may not be an obstacle at all. She may actually just simply be the reason why he's not going to go and talk to the beautiful woman. We're just we're assuming that. But of course, the idea that the wife is an obstacle gives us that sense of aggression towards the wife, even though we've never met her, right? That there's something wrong with his wife, or his wife isn't treating him well, or his wife isn't attractive anymore. And there's a kind of a sense of aggression in that, which may be the story, and that's okay too. But if it's not the story, the subtlety, the subtlety of it is very human. It's that little moment of conflict, which again, not to, to put too fine a pointer on it, but I'm sure you've felt it at some point in your life where you've been with somebody and you see somebody else and you go, "Wow, I'm just going to turn away from that," or whatever you chose to do, because it's human. It's human, it's a normal human reaction, right? I often, on a sort of comic level, I suppose, give the example of my little dog here, who one time there was a female dog on the other side of the fence, and he tried to put his head through the fence because she was in heat, on the other side of the fence. So, and he broke the fence, and then he bit me when I tried to pull him away. And like, he even bit the hand that fed, because the objective was so strong, the drive was so strong, right? But of course, we're not dogs, we're human beings, and we think of the consequences of our actions, and we don't sort of throw people over our shoulder on the dance floor to get from here to that person. We have other things going on, although it'd be an interesting scene to film. But yeah, so we're just more complex, we're more subtle and more complex, and well-written dramas will be written like that. And that's what most of you will have in the scenes that you have at the moment. Joseph's there, when you're talking about the gladiator scene, even though it's quite a simple enough scene on the surface, you've got a guy here who this emperor could actually just murder right now. He's completely defenseless. In fact, like, he could just have his head cut off right in front of everybody right now in that moment. So he's got two objectives here. He's got one, if you want to look at it like this, he's got one, which is to mark his territory here, I suppose, in a way, and to let him know who he is and that he's not going away. And the other is to survive, And so there's two things going on, and he's got to get the survival aspect of this right, or there's no point to anything that he's doing. And of course, the survival aspect of that is to get the crowd on side. Once he's got the crowd on side, then he can get what he wants. Okay, great. So look, we've been talking for over an hour, but I just want to open it up for some questions. I'm going to be asking you about dual objectives, meaning two, or multiple objectives, if you can find more than two, as we go through next week, right? Are there any questions on that at all? Is everyone clear on that? And do you think you might be able to find those kind of nuances in your scenes and monologues?
Yeah.
Great. Have a look for them, because these are the things, because they become complex, they actually can help to pull you in and immerse you into the scene even more deeply, surprisingly deeply. You know, because then you actually start to feel something that's very real and very, very conflicting and very human. You know, where when a character is being pulled in more than one direction at the same time. And sometimes for me anyway, just as I know it's not a great teaching to talk about myself as an actor, but on a personal note, multiple objectives to me are the things that make me feel sensations or feelings that seem real the most fully. You know, the singular objective sort of bores me a little bit. It's the conflicted nature of being pulled in more than one direction that makes me go, oh, the tragedy of being human, that I can't have both of these things. You know, but that's not the way the world is. Sorry, Clara.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. So I suppose it's just language around this, right? So I suppose that's kind of more that's clarification, and I kind of know this anyway, but I always kind of trip over it a bit in my head. So you have your main objective, and then within each beat, you always, that in each beat, your objective is on the other person. You're always trying to make the other person think, feel, or do something.
Yes.
So the objective remains, and then within each beat, different things happen, and you're constantly changing to get your objective. So, I suppose I was getting confused about, and I know this is, I'm just kind of working this out as I'm talking to you. There you've got like many objectives on the way, but
yes.
Then separate from that, because that's all about the other person. But then separate from that, you've got these other objectives that, do you know what I mean? So then the multiple objectives are almost kind of an internal personal thing. Is that right? Because, if you're trying to get, okay, so I want to get the chocolate bar from you, David, and you have it, and I'm trying to get it. And first of all, I kind of ask you nicely and you're not giving it to me. And then I try kind of distracting you in another beat and you're over there. And then I'm playing the whole, I'm really trying to get the chocolate bar, but internally I'm going, why am I even doing, I really don't want this chocolate bar because I shouldn't, because if it's that. So then is it all objectives? Because you can't really play all the multiple, you can play, you're doing you're thinking all the multiple objectives.
Yeah.
But then if it's all about the other person, that's a slight confusion in my head.
I've got you. That's a really good question. Okay. So no, I'm not even going to try on a simple level. Let's go to the sophisticated level straight away, right?
Okay.
So there's different kinds of objectives, okay? Now, with the one that you've focused your brain on there is the one of, what do I want the other person in the scene to do, say, think, or feel?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the other thing, the other kind of, and that is true, right? So the other kind of objective that there is what do I want that person to do for me? Okay. It's kind of the do part, but you're making it what they can do for me. Yeah. You're going down that road. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So if that is the case, then, right. So if you're looking at, what do I want Dave to do? I want Dave to give me the chocolate bar, right? But now you're going a little further and you're saying, well, what do I want? Why do I want the chocolate bar? Take Dave out of the equation for a second. I want the chocolate bar for what? What will it do for me? Yeah. Will it give me satisfaction? Will it fill a craving? And what will it do for me? Oh, now you're getting even more complex. Well, what will it do for me if I eat it? Okay. Will it make me feel good about myself or not good about myself? Will it make me feel good because it tastes good? Will it make me feel crap about myself in the morning because I ate it at all? Right. So what you're doing then is yes, you are taking what do I want the other person to do, say, think, or feel, but that's kind of the objective on the simple level. And then on the more complex level, if I get those things, what will they actually do for me?
Okay.
And that's where things get split. That's where you get pulled in two different directions.
Okay. So it's just like, just a more, so it's kind of like when you're doing out your technique, you write all the kind of basic building blocks, and then you're like, right now I'm going to drop into that level of like, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yes,
You're
absolutely.
essentially trying to get the other character, you know, what you want that character to do. That's one aspect, and the other aspect is that what you want that character to do for me. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, you know, two different, you know, self targets here: yourself and the person or other people you're talking with in the scene.
There you're talking. Yeah. And that was the kind of complex bit that I was actually going to try and avoid, Joseph, because that's when we go into the stuff that the applied art of acting guys have done, which is to do with kind of Zen and all that kind of stuff, which is where you become the target rather than the thing. But that's kind of a different conversation. And that if I go into that, it's a bit too ethereal, and it goes down. We can go into that in more detail next time, maybe, but it will take us a long, long time. But the important thing that, on going back to what Clara asked there, is it's a little bit hard to describe it without examples, but you might find, for example, that, I'll give a quick example. So if you were to think about the graph of the scene that I talked about of the married couple, and she wants a divorce and he wants the marriage to keep on going. When he finds out that she's having an affair at the beginning of beat 2 of that scenario, right? His objective might be to punch her in the face. Okay, the thing that comes over him most powerfully, possibly, is to actually attack her, right? Another part of him wants to know who this guy is, wants to know why, right? Another part of him wants to remain human. Okay, so what do I want her to give to me? I want her to give me a reason. Give me a reason not to punch you in the face. Give me a reason not to act like an animal here. Yeah, and there's a number of different objectives will come up especially in a moment of beat change where a big new piece of information is introduced. Yeah. And what you will want will be to destroy her, will be to save the marriage, which means keeping her there. It will also be to do something unto myself, which is to keep me human, right? And in a kind of, I hate to use a sort of a negated way of saying it, but not to let her take away my humanity. Yeah. And now I'm just sort of going down a rabbit hole of the many kind of multiple objectives that are going on in that moment. But if you put all of those together and imagine like there are kind of if you draw a circle with a whole bunch of arrows pulling out of it, like we did in the applied art on the whiteboard, you know, where you get just grab a bit of paper here. Right, so yeah, so if I was to just imagine that, you know, this is the character at this moment, and there's lots of different arrows pulling out of the character, just like that kind of idea, right? So they're being actually torn in a number of different directions. Okay, so I want to destroy her. What's the opposite of that? I want her back. Yeah, that could still be in there. So to want to destroy somebody and want them back, you know, that tear is what is the feeling. You know, I don't know if you ever had a breakup with somebody. I'm thinking of years and years and years ago now, but I had one where I was so freaking angry. I wanted to push her off a cliff, but at the same time I wanted her back. It was the most bizarre feeling. It was the strangest thing, and like it was literally the most agonizing stretch that was going on inside of me, because I was being literally pulled in two opposite directions. Okay, so that's the point I'm going to get to here. So as you go along, right, looking at in these particular moments what might be happening to your character, you might find that they're actually being pulled in opposing directions. There'll be opposing forces going on there, and there could be a number of them going in different directions like that. It'll depend again on the example. It'll depend entirely on the circumstances that your character's in. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, I know I'm a little conscious that I'm not being 1,000,000% clear on that, but it really does come down to examples, you know. So have a look at your scenes and monologues and see how it goes for you. But what is important about it, though, is that you take your time with this stuff, you know, that you really take the time to let those things in and feel for yourself when you're doing your character work at home or rehearsing your scenes. You know, you need to, at least at first, when you're rehearsing it, feel that sense of you're having an affair. What's happening to me now? Yeah. where am I being pulled? And you'll feel it naturally. And then you might say to yourself, well, hang on a second, what if I added in that I want her back? I want to save her. I want to save this now. And then run the scene again, and that's there too. And then you'll feel yourself get pulled in another sort of direction. And you will feel like you're literally being torn apart. And that's, of course, where emotion comes from, when we feel like we're being torn apart.
Mm-hmm.
We feel loyalties to two different things at the same time, etc.
Cool.
Okay. Okay. Oh, we better stop because we've gone for an hour and a quarter. So yeah, I've got another student now at 4, so I better hoof along and put something in my mouth and eat. But what I will say though is, again, if you have any questions on this as we go along, send me a message. I'll see you on Wednesday and Friday respectively. Okay. It again will be online this week unless something changes, but I'm looking into some things tomorrow, and hopefully, you know, we will move back into, I'd love to move back into the studio if I can, and if it's safe. And I'm certainly not going to, you know, say to people, look, you know, we're back in the studio. If you don't want to be there, you know, you're expelled or something, because, you know, you've got to take care of yourself as well. And we have to take care of each other as best we can. But as long as you're getting the work and you're getting it at a high level, that's all that matters. And you're getting your money's worth. I'm rewarded and satisfied. Right. Cool, man. Cool. Thanks, Barry.
Yeah, well, I certainly feel like I am anyway.
Great. Final thing before we go. Friday studio people, you're probably going to kill me, right? This thing that I'm shooting, it's not confirmed yet, but they're talking about Friday. Now, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that it will be Thursday, because if it's Thursday, you know, obviously everything's fine. But if it's Friday and it goes over time, it could eat into the Friday studio time at 6 o'clock on Friday evening. The shoot itself is a daytime shoot. It's supposed to be all outdoors. So I can't see how they can go too late, because the sun pretty much starts going down about 5, half 5 anyway. They can't stretch it too long. So I'm just going to keep you Friday studio guys as up to date on that as I possibly can as I go along. And if there's, again, if I need to do another evening with you or something, or another session with you to make up for it, if it does interfere, I certainly will, but I'm hoping it won't. Okay, so that's just a kind of a heads up in advance, and fingers crossed. And it is only a 1-day shoot, according to, unless something goes wrong, right, which it hopefully won't. All right, guys.
All right.
I'll let you go, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Emil.
All the best.
See you guys.
Much, Dave.
See you now.
Bye.
Much appreciated.
Pleasure.